All right. Hello there, kitty cats. Welcome. Been a while since I've done a live stream. Been a while since I've done a video. Life is abundant, and I'm seeking to have life and life abundant. Two different meanings there. Chezi, my boy, my friend, my brother. What's up? Hello. So what I want to talk about this morning for, I don't know, we'll see, an hour-ish is I'm going to give some thoughts on my Northwestuary experience. And I'm going to give some thoughts on recurrent things that I think about all the time and what I've been thinking. So just to start riffing, what up, Chris? Good to see you, buddy. I started watching Preston Sprinkle. He had a premiere this morning, and I haven't talked to Preston in a super long time. He's one of those shifty dudes. I've tried messaging him occasionally, and he ghosts me. His life is also very abundant, and whatever. Things happen like that. But he had on Chris date, so a lot of Preston and I's relationship has involved the doctrine of hell. And where I met Preston in real life was at a Rethinking Hell conference in Dallas, I don't know, a while ago. And for those that know me, they know that's a big part of my my theological journey, my understanding of God is the doctrine of hell. And it's something I continue thinking about all the time, and it's something that's very this little corner and estuary adjacent, and it's very related to some ongoing discussions that I've been having with some people in my local estuary, and it's pertinent to current friendships that I have related, Chris, a mutual friend of ours, and multiple friends that I have who don't identify as being a Christian, and what does it mean to be a Christian, and do I? It's hilarious. This is live and real, folks. Hezzy just messaged me and said I have a booger. All right. Yeah, deconstructing hell 10 years ago. Steven. Alex, what up? So once I almost want to think of it this way, is that in doing certain academic studies, there's a point to where you realize where you go as you pursue your education in academia. You keep going up and up this ladder, and you keep studying, and you go to elementary school, middle school, high school, college, graduate school, PhDs, whatever, and you keep ascending this hierarchy of academia, and at some point you realize it's all just kind of the same. All these different topics kind of merge and meld at the top, and it all just kind of becomes one thing. Like go study advanced math, and like physics and metaphysics are pretty related, and poetry even is related to a lot of these things at the upper echelons, I would say, the higher levels. And so I want to read a couple quotes. So one of these is from one of my friends that I met in the flesh, but I had to go to Washington to do that, was Graham Pardun, who is a local guy here, who is I don't know how we introduced him. He's a writer and a poet. He has a Substack called Sabbath Empire, and Sherry was very keen on having him at this conference. And his speech up there is excellent. I was just going back and re-listening through it, and I made a couple quotes. uh, of things that he said that I think are very pertinent to this conversation. So, we'll circle back, obviously, as I am wont to do. And so let's read a couple of those quotes. I also want to talk about, I have these in the description, but I also want to talk about Jared from Heliocentric. I started watching, which I'll probably finish later on today as I'm doing some stuff. But I started watching his video on his review of Elevation Church, which is what the heck's that guy's name? Famous Southern mega church pastor, Stephen Furtick. Yeah. And his channels are great. So he's this. Oh, and it's related also to this George MacDonald quote that I saw on Twitter this morning. And I just love George MacDonald, my priest, who is going to be retiring, and which is a little sad, but who I like very much, has been getting rid of books, and so he just gave me these 2 books, hardcover books, just are fantastic, from like the 70s of collections of George MacDonald's works. I love George MacDonald so much. I mean, George MacDonald is very key. So that's connected to all the hell stuff. I read Lilith. I think I figured it out because of screenshots on my phone in like 2016, 2017, like that, coming up on 10 years ago. And it's one of those Heideggerian works, Terrence Malick, William Faulkner type works that it's poetic. It's poetic diction. It's the kind of work that in your reading of it, it doesn't change your ideas about the world. It changes the way that you see the world. And it's so fantastic. So I want to read this George MacDonald quote. And how do I work Twitter? I'm barely on Twitter. But so it's related to this. So he says, complaint against God is far nearer to God than indifference about him. Which I would say is very related to something I've said, to quote myself. This is something that Jeremy Firth, my friend, who was at my estuary in Northwestuary, who's doing the Lives of the Saints series with Sherry. But I said something in estuary, and he just looked at me, and said, with this funny look on his face, and said, he's like, your way of talking is so strange. You like speak in your own cliches, and somehow it works and makes sense. So, again, the George MacDonald quote, and then related to what I've said, is complaint against God is far nearer to God than indifference about him. And this also, and that's related to a Graham Greene quote that I love, that I first heard from Rob Bell, who is the inspiration, or this quote, this is his, the thing behind the thing, behind the thing. That's a Rob Bellism, because Rob Bell kind of does this too. But I didn't know this at the time, but he was quoting Graham Greene, who's one of my favorite authors, who said, hate is a lack of imagination. And I also think that related to that, love and hate are not opposites. You could almost say that love and indifference are opposites, to riff on that George MacDonald quote. I think hate is a subspecies of love. I don't think you can hate what you're indifferent about. You hate what you don't understand and what doesn't correlate to your current understanding of the good. Oh, I got to bring in another piece, which is related to a quote or a comment that my boy Jess, who I've been doing, we've been doing some non-duality talks, and we'll probably continue, if nothing else, just to piss people off. But this was a comment on his Jordan Hall talk on their Book of Job. I'll just read it, whatever. But so they say, hey, first-time commenter on your channel, thanks for posting this. Your interpretation of the Leviathan and Job was so beautiful. Wow. Much softer than my own, which was closer to Jordan's interpretation. I also don't think you should ever apologize for your tears, especially tears for unknown reasons. Those are truly deep, important ones, the truer than words ones. I once saw a definition of chaos as, quote, long-form, non-linear order. So your idea of surviving in chaos lines up well with the infinite game / game B take care of your next generation stuff Jordan is into. Surviving the present without hope and optimism and not knowing if your efforts currently matter or ever will for any larger purpose or to anyone else's life, not knowing truly if anyone ever gets their judgment and justice in life or their karma for good or correction. All the moments you affected someone for better or worse and don't know about. This is the quote chaos that is the long-form, nonlinear, interwoven order of all things. And the best way to navigate it all is to actually not do much except love and be kind or still when confused or unsure or until clarity presents itself. That's wisdom. That's good. I want to read that again. So all these moments, surviving the present, okay, without hope or optimism and not knowing if your efforts currently matter or ever will for any larger purpose or to anyone else's life. Not knowing truly if anyone ever gets their judgment or justice in life or their karma for good or correction. All the moments you affected someone for better or worse and don't know about it. That is the quote, air quotes, chaos. Well, they're not air quotes. I'm air quoting them. That is the chaos. That is the long form, nonlinear, interwoven order of all things. And the best way to navigate it all is to actually not do much except love and be kind or be still when confused or unsure until clarity presents itself. If one must act, even though we are still confused and life does not allow for us to be still, then default all actions and words to kindness. At least that's how it makes sense to me. That's a beautiful comment, and I think it's fully right. It relates to something else that I don't know where I heard it, but it's essentially that, like, kind of in the Taoist framing and even thinking of things in terms of order and chaos. I suppose this is a very deep belief of mine, and it's related to the psalm of like dark is not even darkness to you. That's what I'm getting at in non-duality talks. And it's that the chaos is not even chaos to you. This is walking on water, which Jess spoke of really well in that talk with Jordan Hall. Who can walk on the chaos? He who is rightly oriented, Christ in me. The Logos can, I'm thinking of that in terms of like Willy Wonka, the Candyman can. The Logos can. So that's one thing. Okay, that's a bunch of thoughts. I want to read some of these quotes from Graham's talk to circle back to Graham because I think they're fantastic and it's related to this. And then I'm going to do some talking about hell and universal restoration, universal reconciliation. I don't know if restoration is the right word. Universal reconciliation, I probably like more. But so in the Grail Country video of Graham's talk, I have these comments and timestamps. So they're good. I mean, I want to read this book. Chris, you've probably read this book because you flipping read every book that's ever been written. So at 129, this is kind of the summary of his whole talk that he says, this kind of says it all, but I'm going to keep talking, which God bless you, Graham. That's how I like to roll. Just give a succinct, aphorism that summarizes everything or a quote, and then continue talking about it forever because God is he about whom we must never speak, but we must always keep speaking. Another Rob Bellism. And that is, and I think that relates to everything because everything is iconic, because everything reflects God, because in him we live and move and have our being. And so if everything reflects God, then it is infinite, which is very related to what Marcus said that I have like this personalist quote that he had in a live stream and another Northwestuary comment. Okay, so this quote that Graham started his talk with from Nikolai Berdyaev's Ethics of Creativity, I think, which I don't actually know if that's a book, but it's a book related to ethics and creativity. I was looking it up, but so here's the quote. It's very good. Our religious life I'll just share and you can see it. And then you can see all the other things that I watch in my show or in my screen. Okay, share screen. Here we go. So you can see the quote. Are we showing it? Yes. Zoom. All right, here we go. Nick, so our religious life is still full of idolatry, and to get rid of it is a great moral task. Creativity is by its very nature opposed to idolatry, and therein lies its great significance. So our religious life is full of idolatry, right? All religion has idolatry in it, Christ and Antichrist, the true and the counterfeit. They're connected. It's like the two-sided coin, which that reminds me I need to reach out to Jason, my boy Almond Tree, to talk about Odin's disc, which is, I guess, apparently mythologically, archetypally, the only thing that has one side, which is an interesting thing. I haven't thought about that much. But so you have both of these, right? Both sides of these things. And to get rid of the idolatry is a great moral task. Creativity, I think this is true. Creativity is by its very nature opposed to idolatry. Like that just sentence, and therein lies its great significance, right? Creativity by its very nature is opposed to idolatry. I think that is true. I think that's very true. And what I would say about that, there's another quote I have to do. But like what that means, this is something I've thought. It's very related to Whitestone name. It's very related to Christ in me. I have postulated before that I think that what life is between birth and death, and this is and resurrection. I mean, I don't know. I think what a human being is doing in life is learning to be a creator. Because I think God is a creator, and I think we are made in his image. And here's the idea. I think maybe the first thing that we're learning to create is ourselves. I think we are creating ourselves in our life. We are becoming who we really are. And I think we learn that through the suffering of becoming. And so being and becoming are like they're a related whole. They're like the two sides. Judgment and mercy. Like, don't divorce these things. All those things are united in a higher unity. Behind any distinction, there's a higher unity. There has to be. Otherwise, you can't even make sense of the distinction. It's, I've often said that in terms of, I was going to start writing, but like, what do we got here? But like this is the distinction between monism and dualism and some form of dynamic unity, or my language is Trinitarianism, but like if you have a monad, it's there is no distinction. Everything and nothing is the same thing. It's like the singularity before creation or before the Big Bang or whatever you want to say, except it's not even that, because there's no potency in it. A true monad doesn't even have potency. It's just everything and nothing. And you can't even say that. It isn't. And it's nothing. That's the true nothingness that has no potency, which you couldn't even say the nothingness before the Big Bang was true nothingness, because it has potency, because hello, unless you want to say all is illusion. And then good fucking luck. That ain't gonna work. So true monism is total absurdity and makes no sense, and there's no point of even saying it. Or you could have dualism, right? So like two dots, you can't but like implicit within dualism is the matrix behind the relationship behind the two. So like behind any distinction, there's a higher unity. That's the point. How is that related to this? So I think we're creating ourselves. And again, don't put the binary between. I've said this before, and I think it's related to Chalcedon. Every meaningful intellectual conversation is about the nature of the God-man relation or the God-creation relation. Everything else is, I think, distills down to that. That is what's going on. And so there is some relationship. Again, even like if you want to put a hard binary, which I think is probably within the Christian church, is the distinction between Oriental Orthodoxy, probably that first major schism, and whatever, people that know more about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but between the like Miaphysitites, Miaphysitism and diaphysitism. So like distinguishing between the natures of like God-man distinction. That's what it is, is like, are those two one or are they more distinction than one? Well, this is like the difference between pantheism and panentheism. And like those are all big words, but like it's this. It's monism, dualism, or some kind of unity that maintains distinction. I made a tweet about this the other day. It's just like, do you collapse all distinction and contradiction? This is one of the reasons I want to talk to Peter Rollins. So Peter, if you're watching, which you're not, but I also want you for the eventual Minneapolis conference. I would love to talk to you about this, but not just this academically and scholastically and philosophically. I'd love that is fine, but I also want to talk to you about this relationally, because I think ultimately this boils down to the necessity of relational ontology versus substance ontology. Because of this, is that can you collapse all contradiction or distinction into an absolute unity? Well, then again, it's a monad. Then it's a static monad that means nothing. There's no point in even talking about it. That's the kind of non-duality that I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the non-duality that includes duality. But you have to somehow maintain where the contradiction and the distinction are not an absolute collapsed monad of unity, but they are at one. They are relationally at one. That is relational ontology. All right. So again, creativity is by its very nature opposed to idolatry, and therein lies its great significance. Because this is what creatives, people that are actually creative, can't be idolatrous, because they're not regurgitating the mammonistic phrases that they've inherited. They're being creative with it. They are not being plagiarists. This is why when you do education and they say, what does this mean in your own words? Why? Because they want you to be creative. They don't want you to just repeat rote phrases, because you don't understand them if you just repeat rote phrases. This is my beef with confessionalism. You can have all the right words and be wrong. You can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right. And that's back to the George MacDonald quote, where he said, what did he say? No, I don't listen. I don't want to go to my feed. I want to go to my profile, because the feed is full of bullshit. My feed is full of great things. Complaint against God is far nearer to God than indifference about him. Because you still care. You're still related. Fear, awe of God, complaint against him. David, a man after God's own heart, said what he felt. Be angry and do not sin. That verse has never made sense to me to the degree that it currently does until this year. To deny that you're angry against God is to lie. Whatever that means to you, the God of your understanding. To say that you're mad, to say that you're angry with reality, what has happened to you, is to deny that is to lie, because you are. That's a real feeling. That doesn't mean that you give over to emotionalism and you rationalize it and you become a victim and you say that like this feeling is absolutely correct and absolute, because then you're collapsing the contradiction and the distinction into an absolute unity, which you can't do. You need to tell people that how you really feel, but you can't absolutize it. That doesn't mean that that's right, but it's real. Be angry and do not sin is such like it's so good though. It's so good. Okay, let's go read this other quote that I want to read, which is fantastic. I want to get this book. So this is also from that talk. So this is from the book God is Red, A Native View of Religion by Vine Deloria Jr. or but that's his, I don't know, his Native American name is something Big Rock Sioux or something like that. I can't remember. But this is so big. And so like he talks about a lot of things related to that, but this is the pertinent quote, and this is related to time, which I think is so essential. This is all related to hell and universal reconciliation, by the way. All this stuff that I'm saying. So if time becomes our primary consideration, we never seem to arrive at the reality of our existence in places. But instead, we are always directed to experiential interpretations rather than to the experiences themselves. Okay, like that is good. It's very good. But here again, be creative, because creativity, you can't be an idolater if you're being creative. Well, you probably still can. But if you're being creative properly, you're definitely not an idolater. So what does that mean? Again, then this is the meaning crisis. Why do we have a meaning crisis? Because you don't know what anything means. Because you've just been repeating propositional tyranny bullshit your whole life, and you don't know what any of it means. Because meaning is inherently personal. The person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. A Lucism. That's true. The personal, not the objective subjective. I reject that whole framing. This is the radical implications of the incarnation. Meaning is personal. What does it mean to you? Because what it means to you is how you then act in the world. That has to do with value, salience, hierarchy, perception itself. Barfield. Okay, so are we still seeing the screen here? Yeah, okay. So if time becomes our primary consideration, and by that I think he means the linear progression of time, and thinking about, you could bring in relativity, Einstein. You could bring in time and space considerations. Watch Interstellar. Like, this stuff is very scientific, T-Grog. It really is. But like, you have to just be honest with it everywhere. If time becomes your primary consideration, then you're not thinking of yourself as where you are. Where are you standing? This is Peugeot's Where Are You Standing? And this gets into your like phenomenological experience of reality versus your abstraction. This is like Peugeot's point, and I'm going to lose a lot of people here, but I don't give a shit. Flat Earth and round Earth. Is your experience of the Earth as it being round, or is it as it being flat? In order to experience the Earth as round, unless you're in space, unless you're in a space shuttle circling the Earth, your experience of the Earth is that it's flat. That is your phenomenological experience of the Earth. If you want to go radical empiricism and not go into the narrative of scientism, a radical empiricist experience of the Earth is that it's flat. That's what it is. You know? Like, if you can't see that, I don't know how to explain it to you. That's just the way it is, as far as I can tell. And so if time becomes your primary consideration, if you're thinking about things in relation to time, so like presence, let's talk about presence. Son of a gun, I'm fired up. Okay, so presence. I can't write. So here we go. Can we see what I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, but I'll keep reading it because I want to get this better. So like me, past and future. Where are you? Here and here and here and here and here and here. Just like right here, presence. You exist in the presence. And then, like I've often heard this said in therapy, or I'm learning this in DBT and in mindfulness and all this kind of stuff. But it's even true. It's the mind of the child too. Become like a little children to inherit the kingdom of God. Because the kid is present. Like what is the future to the kid? I don't know. They don't think about it. They're here. Once you get into like puberty and individuation and insecurity and anxiety, also watch Inside Out 2. It's flipping amazing. You are here. You're present. The future, negatively, this is negative. Like I'm not completely opposed to projecting into the future or remembering the past with your prefrontal cortex in your mind, because that's a gift. That's a good thing. Like Peterson talks about that. The you can do that so that you can project like holograms or images of yourself into the future, and you can play out scenarios, and then you can hopefully apply wisdom to manifest yourself towards different potential futures and realities so that you cannot die, and to make plans. But this is also the biblical wisdom of like, man plans his way and God directs his steps. Or what Chad will say is like, make plans and have expectations, just don't attach to results. Or it's very C.S. Lewis Paralandra. God, I love that example. But this is related to past and future. Just keep sticking with me. This is like in Paralandra when the Green Lady, Ransom, the hero character, this isn't super spoilers, but it's kind of spoilers. He goes to Paralandra, which is Venus. That's kind of a spoiler, but it's a feminine planet, and it's all ocean, and there are floating islands on top of the waves. And somehow the man and the woman, the Adam and Eve of Paralandra, have been separated. And Ransom shows up from Earth. This Earthling shows up, and he's floating on the waves. And the Green Lady gets super excited to see him. And as he gets closer and closer, she realizes, oh, this isn't the king. This is some other person. And then so Ransom can see this on her face, where she's very excited, and then she's not disappointed. She's just like, oh, that's not the king. And then Ransom is talking to her and trying to figure all this out. And this is some of C.S. Lewis's brilliant philosophy and I suppose psychology of humanity and the distinction between an unfallen humanity and a fallen humanity. And Ransom says, and he's trying to figure this out with her, because he's just like, when you saw me and then you realized it wasn't the king, he's essentially saying, okay, this is related to this. Weren't you disappointed? Weren't you disappointed it wasn't the king? And she's just like, what? And then all of a sudden it dawns on her, and she's like, oh, you're making me older. She's like, you have the ability. She calls it she doesn't call it an ability. I don't know. She's like, oh, you're making me see that like I could hang on to the expected good rather than the real good that Maladil, God, gave me. She's like, I could still attach my heart and my desire for the expected good rather than the real good, because the expected good was the king. But then it wasn't the king. This is Chad's like, have expectations, just don't hold on to the results. But then what happened wasn't the king. So then if you are sad about that and you wished it would have happened and you hold on to that, what are you doing? You're not being present. You're living in the past. You're holding on to the expectant good. So like, what's that little phrase? Is that anxiety is projecting yourself negatively into the future. So there are all these bad, unforeseen things that are going to happen in the future, which none of that shit's real. Like, what's going to happen with the election? What's going to happen with the state of the world? It's not real. You don't know. Nobody knows. Which I'm not saying don't think about it. This is the non-duality that includes duality. Think about it, but don't hang on to the results, or else you're not living in the present. It's not the child mind. This is like a Douglas Harding 4 stages of development that he talks about: the infant, the child, the adult, I think, and then the seer, which is the spiral, because the child is like in the oceanic oneness. Peter Rollins talks about that. The future is an illusion. No, the future projection is the illusion. And I'm going to come back to the Graham quote from that Native American gentleman, because this is what he's saying. This is time. Living in time rather than in place, rather than in presence. If you're living into your interpretation of what the future is, you are living in an illusion. Because it's not real. It hasn't happened yet. You don't know what any of that is. Like, you're just not, or it has happened yet, but you don't have access to that. Or maybe you do if you're a prophet. You think you're a prophet and you have prescience, and you're somehow tapped into spiritual realities that know the presence, that know the future, that actually know the future. They're not projecting the future from their current consciousness. They actually know it. They've seen it. That's what a prophet is. A prophet has seen the future. But guess what? You can't be wrong about that, because you've seen it. With your real, not with your physical eyes, but with your eye. Okay, so that's anxiety, living in the future and in your illusion of the future, your interpretation of the future. And the past is depression, where you're living in your memory of the past. But all those things are malleable and flexible, because this is why memory, like sometimes read Loris. Loris is so good about this, because memory and how you remember things and what you focus on in your memory can change realities. There's some really great quote that I read about this recently that I can't remember, ironically. But it's related to when Jordan Peterson says, and this is a negative example, but there are positive examples, I think. And this has to do with like eucatastrophes. Eucatastrophe is all about this, because when this is the negative version that Jordan Peterson talks about. He's like, you can be living along your life and be happy about everything, and then all of a sudden you find out your spouse has been cheating on you for 10 years. What happens? You live in a new world. What has changed? Well, the facts and the events of what has transpired with you and the people around you is the exact same, but your memory and your experience of it is completely different. You live in a different world. The last 10 years of your life are completely different than your experience of them. But like, what is actually different? Nothing's different. Nothing has changed. But your relationship to that has all changed and shifted because of your perception. So like, if time becomes our primary consideration, we never seem to arrive at the reality of our existence in places. Presence. That's how I would say that. But instead, we are always directed to experiential interpretations rather than to the experience themselves. Now, this doesn't mean that there's not going to be pain. But this is like the idea this is one of the things I learned from DBT, and this is hard to say to people that are actually suffering. But I think it's true. So like, if you're actually suffering, whatever, and you don't, like, I'm not trying to like further pain in this, but like, I'm talking about myself. You choose to suffer, because suffering, and this is the frame that I will talk about suffering in, I'm distinguishing suffering from pain. Pain is inevitable. Pain is part of life. It's part of being. It's part of transformation. It's part of becoming. Pain is growth. It's just going to happen. Pain will happen. Suffering is resistance to that pain. Suffering is like an existential thing. All right. Shit. I'm gonna open this up because I've been talking for a while. I want to talk about all this is very related to hell as well. I haven't even gotten to. So this is where I want to take it. We could talk about hell, and if I open this up and people come in, we can definitely talk about hell. But I want to talk about broad definitions, again, definitions of Christianity. And this also has to do with like auditory versus visual things. Chris, if you're still here, this is like your book, Gutenberg Galaxy. It moved, and McLuhan talks about this shit all the time. My friend Sarah sent me something that was talking about this. And I'm sure Chezi knows a lot about this, because Jewish culture and Hebrew, as much as I know, is primarily about hearing and it's oral. It's not primarily visual, where English definitely is, because of like the evolution of language and phonetics and literacy, because you can read inside your own like siloed mind, but it's primarily through visual and it's not oral. But in this Gutenberg 2.0 long form conversation, live streams, YouTube, we're re-engaging with the auditory, which is a different thing. The medium is the message. The medium will change your perception of reality. It's like hearing a poem versus reading a poem. Like they're different experiences. So the thing I want to talk about, because one of my local buddies here, let's make it. This has been all philosophical. Let's try to make it more personal. Let's get into some personalist knowing of all this stuff. So I'll just name some of my local friends. I think it's all right. My friend Dan here has often said that my understanding of Christian is so broad as to be meaningless. Well, again, it's the non-duality that includes duality, and it's Christ and Antichrist. And I think there is one reality, because Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. There's one reality, and it's God, and so like pantheism is thinking of that in a monistic way, but it's probably a dynamic monism, unless you want to say all is absurdity. But then there's also panentheism, where we exist within God, and God still retains some sort of outside thing, which probably gets into all these conversations about energy, essence, distinctions and stuff, which I don't know. I mean, they're maybe fruitful. I don't know. But is my definition, well, and this is the problem with definitional understandings of what do I mean by Christian. I can't give you a definition. I mean, I can, but unless you understand my definition as an icon and iconically, you don't know what I mean. Because otherwise it would be just a static substance ontology image and not an icon. Any definition that I give you doesn't exist on its own. And you're not being creative. And creativity is the solution to idolatry. You can be, if you live in a definitional world, you will be idolatrous with your words and with your understandings of other people, and they won't be true understandings. That's like one of my big points. So, what do I mean? And I'll try to say this when I mean a Christian. To me, what a Christian is one who follows Christ, Jesus Christ, who is historical, but he's also not historical. Like this came up in my in a Twitter thing recently, and I think this is true, and I'm just going to go here and reference it because I think this is legitimate. But I replied to my friend from the Morning Talk YouTube channel, and I'm blanking on what your actual name is right now. How do I find this? Yeah. So he said, in death, Christ became real. The Christ you see in others and yourself is more real than the physical Christ. To which I replied, or that is the physical Christ. So the same way that you know the historic Jesus, I think you can know that in this abstract, living in time, non-face-to-face way. This is, again, the North Estuary face-to-face. Because where is Jesus Christ now? Where's the historic Jesus Christ now? In the I thou, in the face of the other, in the face of the enemy. Like, I truly believe that. In your encounter with the other in love. That's where I would say as a Christian, the historic Jesus Christ is now, up into and including your enemy. And so, again, if you live in the historic, and Graham talks about this beautifully, it's more of that quote from that book by that Native American gentleman, God is Red. I think they talk about that. He talks about this very, very well. But God is not God is present in the face of the other. God is not present in abstraction. Okay, I'm starting to flounder here. I can feel in like a Jordan Peterson way that I can't keep talking on my own and riffing. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to go back and look at comments because I can feel the muse leaving my body. Even T-Grog. Yeah. Christ is present even in the T-Grog. That's why I mean, because, like, come on. I mean, it would be so easy. It's so easy to just disregard somebody you don't agree with and get rid of them. That's also one of those quotes that I love that I don't like to tell people where I heard it from. But, like, the last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. And I think it's a child's game. And I think it's a childish game. Let's say it that way. It's not like a divine child coming back around in the spiral, the seer, which is what Douglas Harding would call it. To ostracize and exclude people that you disagree with is childish. And I think we're called to more than that. And so T-Grog disagrees with me. Great. I take that as a gift. Everything is a gift if you receive it as a gift. That doesn't mean that I have to always choose to play his game. You know, I don't always have to just like go along with T-Grog and get caught up in it and do what he wants to do, you know. But I want him around. What up, Alan?
Hey.
Neil? Good to see you guys.
Oh, Neil's here.
He is. I don't. There he's showing up.
Hey.
Look at him. Look at that Tom Cruise.
I know. I
Looking
was about to
son of
say
a
Tom
gun.
Cruise.
You think? Do you think
It's
AI
a
is
warm
gonna
sunny
take?
day. You're in NOLA. No,
Is AI gonna fly jets better than you, Tom? Neil, you're out walking around. You can't even. Whatever. Alan talk. His service is terrible.
Gosh, it's abysmal. I guess like one thing I wanted to add to this discussion is I totally agree that like creativity, and it's funny because I go to like a conservative church, but I'm like the funny guy, and like you have to carve out that identity because like at first people are like, you gotta, oh no, what are you doing? You know, like, and even, you know, almost to a you know, so like they need a way of understanding that, but at the same time, like we were talking about this actually on our Not Estuary with Neil, but like there's only like you can't destroy everything. You can't like destroy all of people's idols right away, you know, and
that would be probably collapsing all the contradiction into an absolute.
Yeah. And so like just the idea that Neil, could you move for a second? I'm getting some feedback.
Oh. I mean, I might.
But the like you only have the moments to commune with the other person and to like have that. You only have the moments that you have with them, and I think that's often people. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about your quote at the Not Estuary. I totally forget, but it's I barely apprehend it myself, and there's no way. Sorry, what was that? What's the quote?
It's a Lilith quote.
Lilith.
I don't
Is
have
that the book Lilith?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where I've told people that whenever I read that book and I was sitting in the coffee shop and I want to read it all in full. Can I?
Yeah.
So this is the Adam or the Raven talking to someone I can't remember, but they say, "I'm sorry I cannot explain the thing to you," he answered, "but there is no provision in you for understanding it. Not merely, therefore, is the phenomenon inexplicable to you, but the very nature of it is inapprehensible by you. Indeed, I but partially apprehend it myself. At the same time, you are constantly experiencing things which you not only do not, but cannot understand. You think you understand them." Again, that's that quote. You know, you're living in time. You're living in an abstraction. You think you understand them, your interpretation. Just wait. You think you understand them, but your understanding of them is only your being used to them and therefore not surprised at them. You accept them not because you understand them, but because you must accept them. They are there and have unavoidable relations with you. The fact is, no man understands anything. When he knows he does not understand, that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but toward the capacity of one day understanding. For such things as these you are not used, therefore you do not fancy you understand them. Neither I nor any man can help you to understand, but I may perhaps help you a little to believe.
Yeah. And yeah, so sorry, whatever. I'll ask you for the author name in a second. But the point I wanted to make is like that moment of understanding, when you do understand, like that, or you have a moment of understanding with the other person, that moment that we're talking about is like, if you hold on to it, if you damage it, like you destroy it, like you have that moment of understanding with the other person. And so like, and that's good enough. And like the reason I bring that up is sort of Clara in the Not Estuary said like, oh, you know, I'm not like a Christian, so I'm like an outsider. And it's like, no, you're already with us in this moment.
Yes.
Like you're having the moment as much as anyone else is having the moment.
Hell
even if
yes.
You're an ortho bro. So you can't leave, you can't not have that moment.
Yeah.
You can't not have the understanding. And even if you leave forever, like, you know, the sower's already sown and it's already like found good soil. So it's like, it can't be any other way. So it's not like we're like, oh, well, you know, yes, you're on the path, you know, you're on the path of TLC, but like if you do something wrong, you've fallen off the path and it's over. It's like, no, the seed's already been planted. We've already had the moment. And like that's in the past, so it cannot be changed. But, you know, so yeah, just that, like, I think that this often leads, you know, some of this thought can lead to people not wanting to participate in communities. But it's like, or sort of like, oh, well, there's so much idolatry in my community. But it's like, yeah, but that's the only place that you're going to have the moment with the idolater. Like, you're only going to have them where they are, and embrace them where they are, and love them where they are. And that will be the thing that change, not some like, well, you follow my program, or it's we can't even look at each other. So
yeah, that's probably my beef with like confessionalism or identity, or like the person being like, I can't hang out with all these Christians because I don't identify as Christians. You're living in the interpretation. Live in reality.
Yeah,
like it doesn't matter that like they are here. Be here. Don't live in some other place.
Yeah. Well, there are differences. There are the inner sanctums and the outer courtyards, and that's fine. It's just like, I think those things need to be defended so much less than we think about them. You know, like the idea of like, oh, I'm going to like keep you out. It's like, well, they couldn't even be there if they wanted to, because they, you know, whatever. I'll cut it off there. But yeah.
So
Go ahead, Alex.
I haven't got a chance to catch you guys live because of my busy schedule, but I'm really glad to be able to talk to you guys. So one of the things that I found out is that I'm so flawed, and before I realized how flawed I was and how wrong I was so how can I say it? You know, back then, before modern science, where they thought the sun revolved around the earth.
Yeah.
And that's how highly I thought of myself, and how egotistic I was, and how selfish I was, and how naive I was. It wasn't until I realized how flawed I really was that I was able to hear people and understand people and accept them, because I was rejecting them because they were flawed, and all the while I was probably more flawed than they were. And that's when I started to realize what truly is the gift of knowing the way, is that there's nothing I can do to attain perfection, as far as, and that's okay, because he didn't say be perfect so that I can save you. And so, anyways, and the fact that the way I see this is like I was like a 2-year-old, the terrible twos, where it was all about control and all about me. And that's the whole concept. When you hear somebody else, and their perspective is, I'm trying to make them to fit in my worldview, my experience, and that's not even the right way of seeing things. Is there's 8 billion of us. So how can I fit everybody into my own little perception of what reality is? So I was way off. That's all I wanted to say is I was way off, way off. And it wasn't until I started listening to people, started listening to what they were trying to tell me, when I started to realize, oh, you're right. I'm not the center of the universe. Oh, that's right. Oh, I was like a toddler.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, man. That's good. T-Grog, what up? Or Nate? Nate was here first. Nate, what up?
No, let T-Grog talk. I'm glad he came on. That's I have no problem. It's just my thing. It's, and I'm sorry if I sounded harsh, but it's just like, I really don't like it when people are lobbing bombs from the comments. I really wish that they would just get in, and it's like, you've got something critical to say, show up and say it. You know, I would very much love to give T-Grog the opportunity to say what he wants to say face to face. So welcome.
I wasn't even following comments. Were you lobbing bombs?
It's just like, you know, the normal stuff. You know, the atheist trying to define Christianity for Christians.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Tim, I want to hear I'll give you a second. But
well, we don't know what Christianity is in this stream. So It can be all things to all men, as the Apostle Paul said.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
there
is no definition.
That's actually there is a definition of it. And if you follow the logic of the incarnation, it will lead you there. Christ's humanity is our humanity. And to act like there is something that is entirely outside of Christ, that is not in the process of being brought into Christ, is to miss the entire mystery of Christ.
Well, I think that sounds very profound, Nate, but when a serial killer is chopping a victim to bits, I don't think he's incarnating Christ. Call me crazy, but
we have the ability to have we have the ability to do false incarnations. Yes, absolutely.
False incarnations.
False incarnations and live in false worlds.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like I said, I just don't see. I see a lot of very incoherent things being said here that don't. That basically everybody nods their head to and say, "Wow, that's profound, man. That's heavy."
So I want to say something. There is such thing as the pseudo-Christian, just so you know.
There is? Well, tell me who that is.
So I don't think I have the intellect to tell the wheat from the tares, but Scripture does say that there is pseudo-Christians, people that pretend to be Christians but are not. But at least the advice we're given is by the fruit you will know them. Now, I'm not, like I said, I don't claim to know, but I do know at least that there are such that we have to beware. Just because somebody says, "Hell, I'm Christian," doesn't mean like, "Oh yeah, all right." So we do have to be aware. And I know you like the form of Christianity that comes from the Gnostics, but Scripture warns about the Gnostics.
No, I don't think that's Christian at all. I go by the creeds and the scriptures because I'm an atheist and I like clear thinking.
So I think
I go by the creeds and the scriptures.
I think Tim uses the argument, and it's a strong argument, that because we as Christians cannot agree on who this guy was who lived 30 AD, because we can't agree, then there must not be a real truth. Obviously there's no real physics, there's no real biology, because we can't agree on any reality beyond our own projections, psychologically or otherwise. So.
Well, that's what we would predict if Christianity were true, that there's a Holy Spirit, he guides Christians into all truth, and if there were really there's no evidence that that's actually happening. The prediction has failed.
There's evidence of it all the time, though.
So Tim, this is
I think there's an immense amount of evidence, but
because it's I think it's the kind of truth that you're talking about. Like I don't think when Christians are promised that the Holy Spirit will teach them all truth, I don't think that it means that it will teach you all the facts of the world, right? So it's not going to teach the same kind of truth that, say, the scientific method teaches. And we're clued into this because Jesus says, "I am the truth." Now, whatever Jesus means when he says, "I am the truth," he can't mean truth as a mere fact in the world. He's pointing to something deeper, something more personal. So I would say that when we're promised that the Spirit will teach us all truth, it has more to do with the way in which we love each other, which was for me very much on demonstration in a powerful way recently. And Christians of all kinds can do that and do that all the time.
Well, I've had a bit of exposure to Christianity.
Sure.
And I don't see Christians being any better morally or ethically than anybody that's not a Christian.
But again,
you're
basically defining Jesus there, Tim, by what his followers do.
But that's what they're always talking about.
Jesus would say to you, Tim, who do you say that I am? That's what Jesus would say to you.
Well, they're always talking about the fruits.
Yeah.
By their
and
fruits,
Luke was actually said that earlier on.
I don't see the fruits.
Yep. T-Grog.
Yeah.
People are not my savior. I don't have to put my trust in anyone. I don't put my trust in you. I don't put my trust in your reality. I will listen to you, but my trust is not whether the Christian is faithful or not, or if they botch it or not. That's not my salvation does not depend whether my neighbor botches it or not. My salvation is what he has already done Christ
Oh, wait a
already did
minute.
it.
Wait a minute.
That's
He
a very
already
Protestant
he
way of
already
thinking.
accomplished what he accomplished,
Yeah,
and
I
that's what
wouldn't.
I put my trust. I put my trust in him, not in flawed people.
Yeah, I understand
Well,
that.
what kind of world do you live in if you never put your trust in another human being? What kind? How is that a good way to go about
Well,
living at all?
Yeah. Okay. Here, I want to being the.
yeah.
This is a very not Luke thing to do, but I want to establish a little order for this stream because I fully agree with what Alan said here. We're getting further away from connection, not closer. And this is what I said too in my lead up, Tim, before you came on the thing, is I'm very glad for your presence here, but it is true. Like, we don't have to play this game every time you get on stream
Well,
of debating the veracity of Christianity versus atheism.
Well,
No, but he's got a right to. I mean, if that's what he wants to talk about, he's got a right to talk about it as long as
He
it's around
does,
the
but not
thing.
necessarily. But I don't necessarily have to do that on my stream every time he comes on.
Well, no. You don't look. It's your stream. You can kick me off at any time.
Well, I don't want to kick you off.
I'm just trying to be clear about what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that's the difficulty. That's a particular game that you are trying to do, and what you mean by clear has a very specific meaning. What I would like to do.
Wait a minute.
I don't agree. It's a game.
Hey, Luke, let's try to be personal about this. So I think you need to recognize that T-Grog has said that he's on the autism spectrum, right? So you need to understand that ordered and structured thought that is clearly delineated is going to be more important to him than it is to you.
Right.
And you're actually in not at least trying to meet him where he is, you're actually not treating him in the way that is most appropriate. You have to respect the way that person is wired. I had this exchange with my son yesterday. No, not yesterday. Day before yesterday, where my son is also autistic, and he is in his religious life, like the rules and the order and the structure and the received dogmas are all much more important to him than they are to me. And he said to me within 5 minutes, he said to me, "Wow, you're such a heretic, Dad." And then 5 minutes later, he said, "But you might also be a saint." So he was trying to deal with this tension because it's like he has a problem with the way that I talk about my religious belief, right? He doesn't, it's too free, it's too loose, it's not structured and ordered enough for him. But he sees the way that I treat people, and he is moved by that. And so creates this tension within him. So I would say we just try to meet T-Grog where he is with kindness. And I have no problem with him.
That's the
he's allowed to express his doubts and to say, "Hey, this doesn't add up for me. Make me see it." And it's not and I'm not suggesting that you should, and I'm not even suggesting that you should try to convert him. I'm just suggesting that you have the patience to hear him where he is and try to empathize with where he's standing. That's it.
Yeah, and I think that's great. But I guess to quote someone like Manuel Prost or Mark Lefebvre, I do want the conversation to be generative, and I'm not saying I always apprehend when that is happening and when that isn't happening, and sometimes the contradiction and the difference of opinion can lead to generative conversations. But I definitely want there are times when I sense that that's not happening. It's just evolving into this thing. And this is like even the thing behind the thing behind the thing. I think sometimes you can feel in conversations that what is being talked about is superficial to it's something that's going on behind what's being talked about. And so like Rod's question, I think gets at this. So like there's two questions Rod has in here that I think are very good. Anyone feel like trying to explain why we're arguing about this? And then he says, not that it's not worth arguing about, but if it is worth arguing about, why would that be? Because why are we arguing about this?
Because truth's important. It's important.
Well,
Why?
I'd like I'd like to talk about hell, and I can tell you, Luke, why I think hell is important. And that might actually dovetail in a constructive way with T-Grog's concerns.
Okay.
All right, so let's say all our decisions matter, all of them. If you say free will is the most important aspect of our reality, whatever that is, then the implication of that is that all of our decisions matter in some way, shape, or form. And if all our decisions matter, well, the only way for all of our decisions to matter is that there have to be qualitative differences in outcome based on our decisions. And so what I mean by qualitative differences in outcome is that our experience of those decisions, some experiences are better than others. And some experiences scale up, not just in the moment, but in a lifetime, let's say. Some decisions are better than others. Some experiences are better than others. And so here's the question: does God place the salvation of everything higher than he does the ability or capacity for his creations to choose other than God? Let me repeat that. Does God place the salvation of everything higher than the ability or capacity of his creations to choose otherwise? And this is the question, right? Because this comes down to the abortion debate. This comes down to, it's like, is life more important than free choice? And I actually think free choice is more important than life. And the reason I say that is because I see the problem of the last 80 years since T-Grog's generation as mainly the highest virtue being the reduction of suffering and pain, which is putting life at the highest. And I think there's something higher, which is the capacity for us individually to choose our own destiny. The prodigal son must be allowed to walk away. He must be allowed. And in order for the prodigal son's life to matter, his decisions must have consequences. And he has to have the capacity to stay in the pig pen for as long as he wants. And that's the way a story actually matters, is that the decisions people make. Like if we're living in a story, if the story is the fundamental mode of reality, what separates the hero from the villain is when bad things happen, the hero goes one way and the villain says, yep, bad things happen, the whole world is wrong, I need to take down the world. And so I want to have this discussion on which is more important, free will or life. And I am on the side of free will.
So your opinion.
Wait a minute. Well, wait a minute. I think you're close to something really good there, Neil. But the problem is you're associating will. You're associating freedom with will. I think that's a problem. But that there is something that is higher than mere being, I think you're correct. But I don't think that thing is free will, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well,
Yeah, I think that.
the whole
Go ahead,
concept
Alec.
about hell and consequences and whether anything matters, what's important, it's not based on what I think or what I feel, because who am I amongst 8 billion people? So we have to understand who is the one that's going to actually sort it all out in the end. Because if it's no one, then the psychopath that gets away with everything is right. But if there is someone that is going to sort it all out, then the psychopath is wrong. So what I'm saying is, it all hinges on one ultimate truth, not my truth, not my perception, not my whatever I can conjure up, not whatever, because it's not up to me. Reality is not up to me, right?
Yeah.
The consequences at the end of the day, when I pass away, it's not up to me. If it was up to me, that'd be awesome. But it's not up to me.
What I'm saying, Alex, is that God gives us the freedom to make the wrong decisions. God has given me
Yes.
the freedom to make the wrong decisions countless
Yes.
times in my life. But I can also recognize and acknowledge when I made the right decision. And I think very few people give themselves credit when they make the right decision. And that's something I've been better at spotting within my own life. Like I've had this temptation, I've had this certain aspect where I could be drawn a certain way. And then I give myself credit when I successfully fight that temptation. And I have, and I do.
And that's what the point that I'm trying to make. there's a difference of values, and everybody will have a different set of values, and that's what they think is important, depending on what they think is important. That's what I'm saying. We all have our own set of conceived ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Atheist or not, we all judge in a way as far as what is the best, what is appropriate, based on what we seem to think is the ultimate goal at the end of the day, right? The atheist says, well, I'm just going to pass away and there's no hell and there's no God, so who cares? That's what the psychopath does. And I'm saying these are extremes, because there's very few psychopaths, and that's good. But whenever they get away with whatever, so the people that say, so Hitler got away with what he got away with, right? He never went to prison. He never did any of that stuff. He kind of did what he did and got away with it, and he took his own life, and that was that. Right? And if there is no God, then he got away with it, right? Then what he did, who are we to say whether that was right or wrong if there is no consequences for what we do? So that's what I'm saying, is we all have our own set of values and opinions, but that's all in our head, that's all in our hearts, that's all in our, but what I'm trying to say is there's, in my opinion, there is an ultimate reality if there is a God. And it's different than if there is no God.
So I have a question, though, Alex. I think, like, Luke is a universalist, so he doesn't think Hitler went to hell.
He's entitled
You
to
think
his
that's
opinion.
true? You think that's true?
Well, if you're a universalist, that means people will go to hell, right?
All right.
No.
All right. That's okay. So
hell is like purgatory? Is that what it is?
I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, I have lots of ideas about that we can talk about. But again, I don't absolutize my interpretation of what I think reality is.
Can I give a possibility?
So if Hitler repented right before he blew his brains out and turned his heart over to Jesus, is he in heaven or hell?
That's a contradiction, because you don't take your life if you belong if you follow.
So people are Christians, do not commit suicide? Is that what you're saying?
His what he did was what's in his heart.
I would like to.
What he did was because he went out of his way to do what he did.
We have to be. We have to be really slow to speak. There's too many people trying to talk at once.
Yeah, I understand.
I'd like to ask Luke a question, because I'd like to get Luke's perspective on this. So, just the thing you were just reading that said, like, or it's something that you've read from time to time, where it's like, I can't explain this to you because there's no capacity in your heart to receive it, is the gist of it. And that's how I think of the Hitler issue. It's like, could Hitler be saved? I think so, but the capacity for his heart to receive and understand.
Well, wait a minute. Why do you think? Okay, Neil, you gotta stop. I gotta stop it right there. Okay, sorry, I just have to say something here. What do you think Hitler is, or any other person that you could just isolate Hitler, or pick any other evil person that you want, and you could damn them to eternal hellfire and eternal conscious torment, and that has no impact on the rest of humanity? Is that what you think? Did Hitler not have a mother? Did Hitler not have friends?
Did
Hitler not have people?
He loved dogs.
Sorry, the first thing I would say is that I am incredibly grateful that I'm in zero position to damn or not damn anything or anyone. However, I would say so the rubric I apply is to myself. And when I had a specific experience in a church that was the most intense and profound experience that I ever had, the overwhelming feeling was love, but the other side of that feeling was like, Neil, this is it. Like, if you don't pay attention now, I did not know what was going to happen, but it was not a good feeling. And it gave me the impression that there is such a thing as a point of no return. Now, I don't know what that point is. I don't know where it is for anyone, but it was enough fear that it instilled. It was the right mixture.
I'll tell you, Neil, that comes from the demons. That comes from the demons, and I've experienced it. It's a form of demonic oppression.
Well, Nate,
100% comes from the demons. It is not of God. And
Nate,
please tell me who this theoretical isolated individual is that had the removal of which into eternal conscious torment has no rippling impacts on the rest of humanity writ large.
All right, here's what
It doesn't exist.
Neil,
here's what I want to do.
Go ahead.
No. Here's what I want to do. This, I agree. So this kind of conversation, the kind of conversation we're trying to have, in my opinion, there's too many people. If people want to have a conversation where we get down into the nitty-gritty of particular questions and get very specific about it and really pursue clarity, I just don't think it hasn't proven to be possible with 6 or 7 people on screen. Like, this has been ugly.
Yeah, it depends on the intensity of the conversation. Since it is trending intense, I agree.
Yeah,
I have to go,
So-
but Neil, I emailed you, and I
Oh,
haven't heard
amen.
anything.
That'd be awesome.
I did email you, and I didn't hear anything. Maybe I got your email wrong.
You probably
emailed me back.
got my email wrong. Do you have Chad's email?
Yes.
Do I have
yes,
what?
And yes,
I didn't hear you, Neil.
Tim has emailed me, and I emailed him back, and I haven't got anything back yet.
So,
Okay. I got to look.
Yeah. So Tim, if you have Chad's email, we can connect through Chad.
Okay. I'll look for your email. Is it Chad something? I can search.
Yeah.
I get so much junk in my Google mail. It's like crazy talk.
I think it's Chad the alcoholic.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll check that out. But anyway, nice knowing you guys. You guys are very smart people. I just want to be helpful if I can. Because
that's good. So
Tim,
what I would suggest, I think that's good, and I think what Nate said is true. I don't particularly like kind of definitional, really analytical conversations. It's not my strength, and I don't really like them. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't try to get better in those kinds of things. But what I would suggest is that if you have very particular questions, either broadly, academically, about Christianity, you could set up a conversation. This is probably why people have in debate protocols. It's very limited. You talk, you respond, there's a moderator, because I think those kinds of conversations, you need that kind of structure. Otherwise it turns into
I'm not a debater. I'd prefer to just talk to people and ask questions, and they can ask me questions.
Right. And I agree.
Real big.
I would like to respond to Nate if you can give me the opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta go, guys.
Okay.
Bye, Chad.
Bye, Chad. I'll email you. I'm going to go too, guys. But hey, listen, I'm very happy that you're thinking. It's just, for me, it's like an estuary. It's kind of very murky and unclear, and you can't see the bottom. Okay?
Yeah.
That's kind of.
Thanks for coming on. That's good.
Be at peace. Love your life. And good talking to you. Thank you.
And Tim, you can listen, hear this, but I would say, I think it's very true. Like what Julian said, there's a lot of people that said, I, for one, do not want a groupthink monolith in TLC or an Estuary or any of these things. So like, I really try. I appreciate your pushback. I appreciate MJ's pushback. I appreciate Phlebas's pushback. I think I tend to highlight pushback more than I highlight affirmation and agreement.
You do.
And so I want you to be here, but I do also want it to be generative. And one of the areas I need to grow is probably in being more structured, particularly in these kinds of conversations, because it doesn't allow for flow. Flow doesn't help it.
I'm going to just say this. This is my mantra.
Yeah.
Good thinking helps you. Bad thinking can hurt you.
Okay, Anthony, I did not call Neil's belief demonic. I said that message of hopelessness comes from the demons. That is very different than saying that his belief was demonic.
Well, the good thing about being an atheist is you don't believe in demons, so it's great. I'm not worried about it. Thanks, guys. Peace out.
See you, buddy.
Bye.
See you, Tim.
Yeah.
There's about 4 or 5 ways I could go about my response to Nate, but actually I think I'm going to pick an unorthodox route to go by. So, because I know Nate's a gamer, and I like to think of games, video games, board games, little microcosms of reality, in that we wouldn't be attracted to these things unless they reflected something deep about the nature of reality. And one definition of a game that I really like is that that one or more players participate, and depending on their decisions during the game, it results in an unequal outcome. And so if you've ever played a game where like the consequences of the game don't matter, like if you play tic-tac-toe 1,000 times against, like, let's say a computer, and it's always a draw, it's an incredibly boring game, and those are not good games. So so if, like, going back to, if the consequences of our decisions matter, then that quality question, like, you have to look at the existence of quality within all phenomena as like a really weird thing, because what quality seems to indicate is that there are real differences in both the products and the outcomes and the decisions. And sorry, to go back to the demonic. So it would be a strange demon that turned me from where I was 7 or 8 years ago into who I am today. It would be a very strange demon. Now, I'm not saying God can't do that, but then
No, I'm saying if the message is one of hopelessness, it's a demonic message.
No, it's not one of hopelessness. It's one of consequences, which is a very different thing as a parent. Like, as a parent, my philosophy with parenting, and I would say this is probably the best thing I did with as a parent, is you set an extremely strict boundary very wide. So if that boundary is crossed, the consequences are abundantly clear, and that the consequences are enforced in a consistent manner that the child knows what to expect. But it's very wide. So it's the widest possible boundary, but very strict consequences. And there still need to be those boundaries. But that matched my phenomenological experience. It was like a loving, tough father, like, look, kid, you gotta do this thing. And if you don't, it's the problem of evil. Not that God wants it to happen, but like, there is evil. And there is such a thing as God's permissive will. Now I'm channeling Catholic doctrine there, but
that's because the destination matters.
What was that?
That's because the destination matters. Destination matters. It's just, I have kids, and if my son if he was going to take a history test, and he's studying his science textbook for the history test, I would have to intervene, saying, son, you're not doing it properly, because if you actually want to pass the history test, you should be studying the history textbook and actually the assigned section. If you want to pass, if your goal is to pass the history exam, then that's what you have to try to understand. There is such a concept as getting it wrong, but that's the whole point. What is truth? What is value? What is morality? What is the destination does matter. I believe that because I believe in Christ. And if I start ignoring him, that's gonna matter where I end up. I do believe that destination
I know, but
matters.
the thing is let's not strawman anyone here, because I don't think anyone has suggested at any point in this conversation that your actions don't matter, or that actions don't have consequences, or anything of the like. No one said that. No one said that. What all I have insisted is that the idea of infinite consequences for finite actions is incoherent. And the idea that you can punish a single isolated individual, which is not a real thing, for their finite consequences infinitely, is incoherent.
Well, Nate, I respect you, but I'll say this. I don't know how God is going to deal with all this after the fact.
I'm
I
not
don't
saying
even
that.
pretend to know. I don't know how he's going to. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. All I know is that I trust Jesus, but as far as the afterlife, I don't know how that's all going to sort out. I really don't.
So I'm going to shut this down in about 6 minutes, but I think I want to respond to Neil.
Can
and
I
then
just say something about what Hezi said here? This is interesting, because I've always wondered, because this is where I always the one area where I always come to like a absolute like debt wall, and that seems to be irreconcilable between myself and Joseph and Hezi, is that they very much believe in a God who creates good and evil. And my assumption would be, well, that they can't really believe that, or they're defining evil in a way that is different. And the thing I've been wondering is, well, are they linking evil to potency? And then, as he just says, evil is unbalanced good, uncapped potential. So that clearly means that in the way that Hezi and presumably Joseph are thinking about it, there is a linking between evil and potency. But that's a different. I think that's a very different. I mean, philosophically, I can see how you can make that move, but it runs contrary to what we usually mean when we say evil.
Yeah. So now I'm going to take ownership of this stream. I'm going to finish saying what I started to say. I'm going to talk about how I'm going to run streams in the future. And then I want Alan to say something, and then I'm going to close it. So that's what's going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, I'll probably mute people. So I'm realizing how I want to run streams is that if these kinds of conversations come up, because even right there was an example. I was trying to respond to Neil, and then we brought in another topic from the chat. I don't want to do that in the future. If people do that, I'll say that's another conversation we can have at a different time, but we need to table it because we're jumping around way too much, and it makes me personally feel like a crazy person. So I don't want to do that in the future. And then Neil, as a response to what you were saying, I think we need to have a longer conversation about hell, which I think would be a great thing to do. I like your pushback about it, and I think there are a ton of misunderstandings about what I in particular mean when I talk about Christian universalism or ultimate reconciliationism, or like even Hitler being in hell, or what people have lots of interpretations of what they think I mean, which aren't accurate. So like when you say there are consequences, I think it's true. And I think the best way to talk about it probably is in a familial place, but then extrapolated infinitely because we're talking about God as a father. So like with my kids, I absolutely want to give them the freedom to make choices. That's inherent. That's intrinsic. That must happen for them to become the people who they're called to be. But I do not believe in their ability. I, as a father, if I had infinite power and wisdom and love, would not believe in their freedom to make choices against their own good to their ultimate demise and non-being. There's no way I believe in that. I love them. So you have to be able to hold those things in some kind of an antimony that I think ultimately resolves in because who they are ultimately is an icon of God. That's who they really are. And that doesn't choose against its own good to its own demise. That's nonsense to me. So that would be my response to you. We can have a longer conversation about it if you want. Alan hasn't talked for a long time. Alan.
And Luke, I want to apologize if
No.
if I was caused of this.
Nope.
I haven't.
Nope. See, this is what I'm talking about. You can apologize. That's great. But this is where I need to take more control of my streams. Alan.
Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting conversation. I would just say that, like, when people jump on, we should let them say their thing. And I think it's actually a more powerful move, not just as like a nicety, but like actually having generative conversations of like when Tigrog says peace and love at the end, it's like he's giving his value. You know, he's not just taking a hammer to our values. Like, let's dig into that. Let's talk about what he means when he says be peaceful, be loving. Because he has his own little like metaphysics that he's dropping in. So let's like focus in on that rather than just like be like, oh, he's hurling bombs at us. It's like, well, there's also a way around that where we can actually have a conversation about like, what is the Tigrog metaphysics, and let's talk about it, and not just to annihilate his metaphysics or his belief system, but to like actually have connection and communion.
Yeah, I think that's well said. All right, Alex and Nate, you guys sorry for muting you, but I'm trying to bring it in a little bit.
Till next time, guys.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Nate?
Yeah, I just hopped on because I saw you were doing this, and I think I said everything that like I there was something like Neil, like part of what Neil was saying, even though I would have wanted to I wanted to push back because I don't think what he's talking about is free will. I don't think
free will,
but he is talking about freedom.
Yeah.
But he is talking about freedom, and there's a way in which like freedom is higher than being. Yeah, freedom itself is beyond being.
There's a lot of meat there. If in that question, is freedom higher than being?
And that would be something I would love to get into with him. And I think Neil's a really smart guy. And I certainly wasn't trying to. I was actually trying to push him toward what I thought was a deeper insight that was contained within what he had said.
See, and that's good. Like that kind of clarity and precision to me, like when you just said that and there's fewer people, like that felt generative, but earlier it felt like chaos.
Yeah, that's right. And I know it came off that way, but that's like, I would hope that people know me. I guess I haven't been around in a while. People forgot that. It's like if I'm seeming to be pushing at somebody in a way that seems harsh, it's generally because I see something contained within what they've said that maybe is just on the borders of their perception. I'm trying to get them to see it.
So, Tim, if you're still listening, I want to close out with this. I appreciate you in the corner. I want you in the corner. I like if you try to collapse the contradiction into an absolute groupthink monolith. That's never been good. I don't think that's good for TLC. I don't think it's good for anything. I think what would be great is if you have a randos conversation with Chad. I think it'd be great if you have a number of conversations getting into clarity with T-Grog. Let's make a series where you have one-on-one or one-on-two conversations with people in TLC, and you get to air out your disagreements with them, and we can get into the nitty-gritty. I think that would be fantastic. But sometimes, yeah, going between the comments and the back and forth, the kind of like tribalistic T-Grog versus, and sorry, I'm going to put you on blast, McMo, but like McMo stuff, I'm not into. I don't like it. So anyhow, all right. Alan, you got anything else, buddy? Okay, we're good. Until next time, people. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.